All right. Sometimes you feel like you need like a little fancy theme music to come on before we do this thing, but we ain't, like a lot of do.
My wife said the same exact thing. I'm like, yeah, but we have to get copyrighted music that belongs to
And
us.
listen, now let me tell you, it's a hassle because the other little show I do, every time we turn around, guess what happens?
What happened?
Our stuff is getting dinged. So everything getting dinged and it getting muted. And so I said, listen, hey man, don't come bring no more music on the little show, man. Let's just go natural, brother. Let's do it natural. Let's go natural. All right. So again, I want to say welcome everybody here tonight to Fatherhood Talks. This is the weekly fatherhood roundup. We get together and share as fathers and talk about interesting topics that affects us as men, affects our children, affects our women, and mainly affects our community. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about the effects of public housing on private family. Hold on, let me correct that. Let me say the correct title, because I sometimes I'm just doing a little shortchanging. I need to say the correct full title so we don't have no problems out here. Because the full title is a little bit long, I just shorten it up a little bit so we can have a little sweetness. Today is the positive and negative effects on public housing on private families. That is the whole title for today's show. And as you'll see, we just kind of shortened it up. That can be pretty long. We're talking about the effects of public housing on private families. And if you came on here from looking at the picture that was sent out, that came out with the invitation, and as you look on the show, you'll see some of the most classic housing projects in the United States. And I call them out. They got the Porky Bean on there. They got Cabrini Green. They got the Magnolia projects, and they got the Richard Allen. So we're talking about Philly, Miami, Chicago, New Orleans. So we got those different places that are definitely sharing the housing, and it's going to put us in the right place. We got to talk about this topic, and we know the topic brings you, but we end up taking you on another place sometimes when we get to this topic. So let everybody in the house, in the room, go ahead and introduce themselves. And again, I'm Ron Osborne Williams. I have a daughter. Go ahead, fellas.
Hey, good afternoon or good evening, rather. My name is Lionel Lightborn. I am a father to a tribe of 7, 4 boys, 3 girls. I'm sorry, 4 young men, 3 young women, because all of them are adults. And that's me. I'm always glad to be here and chop it up with the fellas.
Frederick Adams, the 3, 25, 15, and 9, and the grandson that's 3.
Okay, correct.
Donald Jones, father of 2, 12-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son.
Hey, Dr. Doom. I guess you guys are up next.
All right, this is Doom, father to 8 and 1 grandson.
Okay, so who else we got down there? Travis. I think it's Travis
Hi.
and Ronald. Ronald.
Hi everyone. My name is Ron. I'm a father of 9. I've got a blended family. That's why it's 9. and one on the way.
Hold on. One on the way?
One on the way.
All right. Hey, okay, I'm gonna say that for later. All right, welcome tonight, Ronnie. You know, snuck one in on us tonight, but that's not the time and the place. We'll get to that maybe tomorrow.
All right.
All right. And I think it's left is Travis. Not microphone might not work now. You know, he was so concerned about the microphone, his speaker working. Now it might be broken. Well, anyway, we'll get on to this topic because I think that this is, you know, some people may not even think about why this would even be important in reference to fatherhood, right? And because we don't look at the real factors that affects father's absence. We like to, you know, I was telling the group today that I do in my work with early maternity home visitors. I was telling that a lot of times as a society, we just assume that dads don't want to be involved, or we make on this assumption that the dad is not interested in being a part of the child's life, or even part of the family structuring that occurs. But the lady was giving me an example, and she was saying that the dad, you know, they got a divorce, whatever, but the dad started picking up the kids. And she would complain that he didn't feed them the right way, they didn't do this. Then she said, now the dad stopped picking the kids up. And I said, and I asked the worker, I said, maybe you should ask the mom, is that maybe dad, it's not that he doesn't want to pick up the kids no more. Is he feels like, since he's not doing a good enough job at it, and it seems like he's messing it up, maybe you just leave that to you. And because we sometimes forget that men are human. They have emotions. And I know that's hard to believe because some men do have emotions and feel like, well, and then their ego come into play. So, you know, if you tell me I don't know how to do something, because a lot of times I don't, where did they grow to, you know, if they didn't get the playbook on how to be a dad, they won't really know how to do those things. And they have to learn just like everybody else has to learn. And then sometimes they learn the hard way. But they'll learn. But if you penalize them, if you make it feel like they don't know how to do it and they can't do it, they'll I think many of them just disconnect and do what they know how to do. Take the kids to get ice cream. Then you say, you only do fun things with the kid. Well, that's things that I know how to do that won't get criticized. So, I mean, and we've seen this because I use that, I think about that Fatherhood movie with Kevin Hart. And when he had his daughter and all the stuff he was doing, some people were so judgmental of how he was raising his daughter. He had to do it himself and he didn't know any better. And so because he didn't know any better, he just had to try to do what he could do. But he did it. But he did it after, you know, learning. And so sometimes people forget that many fathers have this so-called narrative on what it means to be a father, and then they're not going to do the things the same way that maybe a mother would do them. And that's one of the biggest things we sometimes have to look at when we're looking at, hey, what happened? And I'm building all this up because I know Lana gonna take it. I'm setting this ball right up for him to knock this whole idea of why that's become so important when we look at housing and what happens in housing and why somebody would say, why this man don't stay with his kids and his wife? Why he ain't there? Why he's staying down at the rooming house? Oh, because he must want to be a player. He must want to have a whole bunch of women. You know, never thinking about the economic component of what's real about this. You know, they killed James Evans, but James Evans disappeared from the Convenient Greens from Good Times. So welcome tonight, Rohan. Glad to see you back here. Okay, you on mute, so we can't hear you, but
yeah, thank you, man.
All right, I know you can add a lot to this. All right, Lionel, what you got?
No, and I'm glad we're talking about this topic because this has been a I guess a mythical topic. Let's say mythical when it came to a mythical barrier per se, when it came to fathers being separated from their children, or rationale for fathers being separated from their children or not involved in their children's lives. I think there's 3 historical factors and 1 historical fiction when it comes to that: public housing and fatherhood. Again, 3 historical factors and 1 historical fiction when it comes to fatherhood or fathers not being in the lives of their child because of the barrier of public housing. Historically, and particularly as an African-American father, I know historically, and I'm just going chronologically, we had 3 factual reasons fathers may have not, and 4, it just goes on, the 4th one goes unsaid, but 3, but we're talking about public housing, so I'm going to pull slavery out of it. You understand? Because we're talking about public housing. So this is public housing is post-slavery, right? And that is accurate. And so since it is post-slavery, then we have to talk about the realities, particularly of men, and particularly Black men, when it came to public housing and the relationship with public housing. Now, when we understand the premise of public housing, is mainly for disenfranchised or indigent, particularly people who almost has some type of either economic disability or a physical disability. So you have elderly people that would have been eligible for public housing, and particularly single parents, mainly single mothers. And so the way it was set up was mainly for single mothers and elderly indigent citizens. And so with that, factually and historically, I know you got 3 factual things that keep or might have tried to been a barrier for Black fathers, because we are the head of the household, or at least we were back then. And one of those factors were eminent domain, right? That's number 1. So keep these names in mind. These are factors. Eminent domain is number 1. Redlining is number 2. And gentrification is number 3. So we going in chronological order. Post-slavery. Eminent domain. What does eminent domain mean? It means that you can have post-slavery, you can have Black people building communities like a Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is notorious, but we live right here in Florida. So we also have Rosewood. And I would lean more to Rosewood because it's more closer to the state that I live in than Tulsa, Oklahoma. Equally thriving, one thriving on the corporate front, which means they did a lot of economic or corporate building, more intellectual front when it came to lawyers, doctors, etc. And then in the South, you had Rosewood, where Black people thriving culturally, what they call it, agriculturally, right? And so they built their success agriculturally, where in Tulsa they was more they corporately when they had banks and stuff like that. So they was more corporately engaged. Both suffered eminent domain. And what does that mean? That means that the government switched the rules on what they have and could not have. And once you switch the laws or the rules on what they can have versus what they can't have, you can switch the rules and then take it for cheap. And that's what I'm saying. Eminent domain, switch the rules and take it for cheap. Right here in Miami, where we live at. And then you had, I'm going to back up because you heard an even popular story with that was trending about 2 weeks ago, where the results of eminent domain, a beachfront property in California, I'm talking about on the water, was actually returned to the original black family that it was eminent domain or taken away from way back about more than 50 years ago. And so with that eminent domain, say in the main island on South Beach, where and it's as quiet as it's kept, Fisher Island was actually owned by a black man. That's factual. That's historical facts right here in Miami-Dade County. So Fisher Island was owned by a black man, one of the first black millionaires in Miami-Dade County named Dorsey. Dorsey owned Fisher Island, and what does Miami-Dade County do? Or I think, I don't know how much Flagler might have had to do with this, so I can't validate that part. But what do Miami-Dade and the government does? They see this man have this very priceless piece of property in this young city that's getting ready to be sprawling and booming, and that's adjacent to the very port of Miami, and they take it in the eminent domain and take the property away from him. Or buy it for him. So, and then again, this is how tricky eminent domain is. Because if they didn't take it, they will buy it at a very base, cheap price that they control setting the tax code for. You see how this works? I set the tax code, I make the rules, boom, we buy it and move it out and say that, and this is the most important thing about eminent domain. If anything, what makes it legal? Because if the government said they have need for the property, that makes it legal for them to take your property. That's the premise of eminent domain. And so that's one historical factor that have pretty much robbed not only just black men, but people of color out of their property legitimately. Well, not legitimately, but illegitimately, but legitimately as it pertains to the government. So eminent domain is one. The second thing you're talking about is redlining. Redlining was another thing where another government sanction where they kept the segregation, which was to legally ensure the segregation and the separation of black neighborhoods versus white neighborhoods. The problem with the redlining is they will build like poor to like maybe poor to mediocre. And so, I mean, the substandards of where they would build housing for black people were shacks, where you would have people who had their house built with concretes and all the different stuccos and stuff like that. Those were the white neighborhoods. And so when living in a stormy state like Florida, you would have, and floods and stuff, rainy storms, stuff like that. The climate would take the toll on those black neighborhoods. And so black people, and not to mention that, black people coming out of slavery, post-slavery, were hungrier. And so our accomplishments were so great that we were coming up, they don't know how we was getting the money. You understand? And the commerce among black people was so great that next thing they know, they'll look up and we were trying to buy houses in their neighborhood. And so you have one person, and the success level was so great. So you have one person buying over here, one person buying over there, one person buying over there. And to stop that influx and that growth of black people actually growing like they should have, and at the level and the prosperity, what they call it, the momentum they were growing at, they had to create the redlining laws, which saying that black people can't buy in certain neighborhoods, which is why you see all the different train tracks. One side of the train tracks, you see usually black or a certain class of people. On the other side of the train tracks, you see it starts to be more affluent. And so the redlining was there to keep people separated, not just racially, but also economically. Economically, I mean, yes, that means that you couldn't buy, as a black person, you couldn't buy things of a certain quality. Because if you buy certain things of a certain quality, it becomes an access and you build equity. Now, what's the difference between asset and equity? I'm like, well, if you acquire an asset, you automatically acquire equity. And now with that equity, guess what? You don't have to go borrowing from anything. You got equity, you can actually lend. And so now you're in danger of becoming the lender and not the borrower. We have to redline, you guys. So you had and the red line also worked on the military front, where you had people coming back from World War I, World War II, and they was coming back from the Vietnam, particularly World War II and the Vietnam War. You have black people equally fighting on those wars, equal front with equal dangers and everything, but we didn't get the equal benefits of the VA loans and stuff like that. And so because that didn't happen, black soldiers were getting denied when it came back to buying houses for their family versus white soldiers was getting the VA loan automatically. Had the black soldiers got equal access to the same VA loan, I guarantee you, you'll see a totally different economic infrastructure in America as it pertains the comparison of white people to black people. And so the redlining is one of the economic redlining was one of the economic factors that historically and factually kept particularly black men from providing for their families on the level they could. So now understand, you got first base, you got about 2 levels so far, and I didn't even get to the third one. And so if you got eminent domain, which factually stopped black men from really attaining the level of success they can to really be the men they could in their family. And then you have redlining, which equally compound the first injustice, and that just added to the separation. You understand? I need you to see how this thing widens. And so with each step, it widens the economic gap and almost fades the black man out of the family, because I think the Bible says the best, hope deferred make you sick. A hope deferred make you sick. And so once the eminent domain kicked in, that was the first kick down of hope. Then the second thing, the redlining, that's the second kick down of hope. Then you have the gentrification, and which is what we experiencing right now. And the gentrification, what the gentrification does is, I think black people, we were very good. We was on the opposite side of this post-civil rights, which means, no, not even post-civil rights, pre-civil rights, because our communities were swelling. You understand? You see black communities and a lot of historic black communities that were predominantly owned by white people during the redlining in the eminent domain. And so with that, with the gentrification thing, what you do is you try to pretty much phase out. That's it. With the gentrification, what you do is build public expressways through those neighborhoods to break up the communities. You said it word? We're gonna zone your area of land, and a lot of times, black people at that particular time had a lot of prominent pieces of land, which made gentrification even more weaponized. And so what they say, okay, what we'll do is we have to split them up. So all of a sudden, you got an expressway coming through your your black community, and which, as you can see in things like Overtown in Miami and different, even in California and different metropolitan black areas that didn't have an expressway. And all of a sudden, when the expressway was slated to come through, the first area they were slated to come through were black communities all across this country, not just in Miami, where I'm from. And so with those, you got 3 levels of economic injustices, right? That can legitimately dismiss the 4th injustice, because I think the 4th injustice is not an empowerment, it's a very embarrassing argument, which is public housing. And the myth, and this is where the myth coming at, that public housing separated, took the man out of the family. I'm like, no. And you got to be careful, because what they do is you take that myth and it cripples the facts of what we just explained when it comes to eminent domain, redlining, and gentrification. And so if you use that argument, which is more conspiracy than anything, and then you take something like that and put it to factual argument, what it does is weaken the narrative of why black men, or particularly men in general, are really not in their families, but particularly black men. And so black men have a legitimate gripes, but I want them to have a fact when it comes to the facts when it comes to public housing, or why they're not in the lives of their family, and the plot that actually led, or the historical plot that actually led to it, versus the myth that we can't really prove.
Well, you know, Lionel, you bring up a very good point, and you I think that you started a little bit later than I would have started. I would start to post-slavery, and our development, and also the great migration of those things that occurred. And a lot of people forget, and I don't think people remember, because we don't. This is all part of that. What's the thing they try to do about our history? It slips my mind because I can't get it. They don't want you to teach black history.
You're talking about critical race theory.
Critical race theory.
Right.
Perfect example of this is we're talking about a perfect example of this, because before those series that you're talking about, and we look at the black family and the black father coming from out of the slavery, and then starting and developing the things they were able to develop from out of slavery. That's where you got the black codes, you got the terror riders coming to your house, burning your house down. And what happens if they burn your house down? Then what happens? You leave because you don't want, and now the land that you owned, so we go even further, this so far back to this land that was given to you, the land that you own, the land that you work for, because raiders came in the night and threatened you, or maybe they came to your community and threatened that you had did something to one of their people, or you had did this only to this preeminent domain that you're talking about, that I would kind of call it. So when we say, hey, why did the people migrate up to the end? Yeah, it was the industrious revolution that they wanted to go to factories, but they also wanted to stop dying and being in fear. You know, we can't prove this, and I want this to be very clear. I may not be able to prove it, but if I got the money to research it, I could surely find that a large majority of Black households were made single parent by the killing of the fathers during that time, either by lynching, by running them out of town. Many oppressions was done to not just the father but the family. But it was unmoral to, I'll say in some places unmoral to do things with women and children, unmanly. But they could do anything to that man who was a father, who, as we know and we think about it, we listen to your great-great-grandfather and great-great-grandmothers talk about that time, about Mr. So-and-so who could say something to your grandfather and she seen it and it felt like he couldn't even be a man. And then that's what happened. It affected the transgeneration of your family in some sense. And we have to think about that. We pretend like all of these mystical reasons is why fathers are not in the house. That we're just cursed. We look at our other counterparts and say, oh, they're in the house with their family. Oh, but I think you said it. What's the two? Instead of being dysfunctional, we have been disenfranchised. But that's not listen. Don't get me, and I know Lana will support me. Don't get it twisted because I'm talking about you being disenfranchised, meaning that you can just lay your hand back and say, I ain't gonna do nothing else. This means that you gotta work, I hate to say it, you gotta work harder. You gotta do a lot more than what you would have done, what the other people around you gotta do to maintain our families, to maintain them. It's not as easy to say, I'm just gonna be in the family. Listen, I'm gonna do what the next door neighbor do. Because the next door neighbor don't have the history of trauma, the history of trying to tear apart and neglect and take us away, And if you can't see it, and that's why I think it's important that this idea that critical race theory became so issue, and because there's a lot of disenfranchised that has been done since the turn of us becoming full citizens. I say it like that. The moment from the time we became full citizens, people wanted to continue to disenfranchise us like when we wasn't citizens. So I just had to take a little bit back further, Lana, because I want to add in a part of the fear and the trauma of you start describing it in more intellectual way that they started doing the things. But initially it was done with fear and fear and death and hanging and burning. And so, being traumatized like that makes a person be able to come to you and say, sign your land over. They don't got to threaten you, but in the mind, you still remember your Uncle Charlie and your granduncle hanging from those trees. So you'll say, let me just sign this stuff over. I ain't got no problem. Let me sign it over. And next thing, your eminent domain is out of here. Oh, listen, give me 3 pennies on the dollar for every acre. When the acres is 150 an acre, give me 3 pennies just to get out of there to survive. And that's another part we have to really begin to start thinking, the criminalization of the things that can happen to us and this. And we know it is large in these public housing situations. You're not supposed to be in a public housing situation. You're supposed to be a man enough to go get your family their own house.
Well, that's where the myth kind of intersect. You just said it. I'm like, for guys saying, oh, well, public housing, and particularly when a black man said it, because I had a few discussions with them, I'm like, you're not making any sense. And the reason you're not making any sense is because black men never had public housing. That's the problem. Men, I'm like, no, black men always built their houses for their family. And so I was trying to figure out, like, when did we, as black men, or particularly men in general, but particularly black men, I'm like, when has black men ever had a relationship or any type of marriage to public housing? Never, ever. That's not even in our history. And so, because to say that it's in our history is to say that, and to say that it gives us some type of reparations. You understand what I'm saying? Public housing. What you're saying is public access. You got to understand, we as a people, and particularly as black men, never received no reparation. So if you subscribe to that particular argument, you're saying, oh, they gave us some type of reparation. I'm like, no. And then you gave
right.
And so I think sometimes I'm like, we got to watch how we talk, because I'm like, you double talking. Because here it is, you're saying on one side of the mouth, oh, we never received any reparations. On another side of the mouth, you're saying, well, they gave us public housing, but they took the man out of it. I'm like, no, they never even gave us that. And so we didn't start getting treated, what they call civilly, really until the civil rights movement, which is here goes another myth, which is why the civil rights movement was so important, because you have some black people around here, and again, we're talking out of conspiracy, saying they were better off before the civil rights movement. I'm like, are you kidding me? Because let me give you factual facts of what the civil rights movement did for you. And it wasn't your right to vote. People talk, oh, it gave us our right to vote. I'm like, no. What it did give you and expanded was equal rights of protection under the law. Remember, when you didn't have equal protection under the law, you were subjected to whatever disenfranchisement your neighbors or whatever your hateful neighbors can impose on you. And if the law didn't see you as equal, you understand, they didn't put the effort in protecting you. That's the difference. And it didn't stop the lynchings, but what it did was said, listen, if we have white police around, it made white police protect black police. I mean, not black police, but white police, but either protect black citizens, or they had to create black law enforcement agencies to protect black citizens. Now, whether it was easy or not, I'm like, listen, I don't really care about how well it worked or how poorly it worked. All I do care is the protections are in place, and that's what the civil rights movement is all about. Equal protection. Now, what we're facing right now, and the problem that we having right now, and again, I'm like, listen, study your own history before you give way to other people's disparities or putting disparities on you. The equity of civil rights was just to accomplish equal protection so you can have the right to accomplish what you need to accomplish. That's really it. We need you to be able to be able to stand up before getting knocked down, and legally have the right to kill somebody who threatens to knock you down. That's civil rights in the gangster format. But what the problem that we have right now is and the struggle we have right now is equal access. So you got to really understand your history to understand your reality. I'm like, your fight is not your parents' fight. Your parents' fight was to make sure that you have right to protection, or equal right to protection, or at least some type of protection. And so now we got your right to protect yourself. Now what we have a right is to have access to grow yourself. And so one fight, our parents' fight was the right to protect ourselves, and our fight is the right to grow ourselves. And then our children fight will be their right to expand themselves. Simply put, protection, grow, expand. And that's simply it. And so I think we have to get up. I'm like, listen, I don't even want to have a public argument, a public housing argument. I'm like, listen, a black man ain't got nowhere, no history, but none of our history is in public housing.
Exactly.
And so I don't even subscribe to that narrative. But that's just one of the main arguments that you're going to run into, and particularly as a father, and particularly as a black father, when it comes like using that is not a defense mechanism. There's nothing factual about it. Use the 3 facts that you have in place that can solidify your argument. Go ahead, Rowan. Or anybody else.
Uh,
I,
I just, oh, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead. I got you.
No, I just wanted to throw out there that in light of the Civil Rights Act and all of that that's been passed, in all the history leading up to that, we've only been able to, quote unquote, have equal protections. It hasn't even been 60 years. So anyone thinking that hundreds of years of what's been done and ingrained into the society can be undone in less than 60 years, to me, it's a ludicrous idea. There's no way that you're going to undo and give everybody equal access and equal protections in under 60 years when, prior to that, it's just like you said, you exercise your right to vote, you hanging from a tree. You do anything at all that's against their status quo, you hanging from a tree. I just see I see things as a war on different fronts. Not just the I see the gentrification, I see the redlining, I see the all those things, but the public housing is a war on another front, because it does even though a black man shouldn't be looking for those things to give him a place, what it does is it weaponizes an option. So instead of that man and that woman working out a strategy to get a place to house the entire family, it gives that woman an option to, hey, let me get this place right now, but by the way, you can't live in here with the family. So it's not that it necessarily has excluded the black man, but it's been weaponized to not help keep the family together. All of them welfare systems has done the same thing, because it tells a woman, hey, you got to put this guy on child support if you want any help. If you want not even just food stamp, if you want health insurance, they weaponize that same welfare system to say, hey, we can't work anything out, together as a black man and black woman. It's weaponized now, and I gotta do this to you in order to get something as basic as health insurance. So I don't look at that shit as a myth at all. It's just a war on different fronts. And if they can weaponize it, they will.
You make a really good point in there, and I see where it connects with Lama's point about, like, public housing is not something that is something that I'm giving you, because it has so many stipulations. If it was something they're giving you, we'll say, see these houses here, you, black man, can take your family to live in them. And you can find a way to work yourself into them, to work out of them. Matter of fact, like, you can make them transitional house. See, if it was something to benefit me, it would be transitional. That you could come in and pay this little rent, but you only have 2 years, 3 years, a special request, 2 to 3 years to come in, build up your credit, build up your sustainability to move to your next location with your family. And only people coming in here is families. If you're not married, husband and wife, you can't come into these homes. Now that's what we talk. Now you talk about that being something that's supposed to be a lift up, help up. That'd be help up. The way public housing work here, even the people, and this is that other war on poverty, on poor people, because if the woman comes to stay there, she can't ever do anything to get an upper leg to get out either. It's almost like a trap. Because if she makes too much money, if she makes enough, then she's not eligible to stay there, but it's not enough to get one of those $4,000 a month places, because she only making $2,000 a month. How that gonna work out? And so it means that if you want any, and here's the other part about this, that you make a great point, Dr. Doom, about services, human services, community services. So a poor family, and I'm gonna say this, but when I say family, I mean a black man, black woman, a white man, white woman. I mean a family with children, even extended family like a grandmother or grandfather who they have to kind of take care of. These are the and they're having to work to do this. Can't get any leg up because the stipulations is you have to be so underdeprived and you can't have anybody that can sustain for you to make it out. You'll be better to try to save some money and get your trailer park and move out to the trailer park. On somebody eminent domain on somebody's land.
But you know what you just uncovered? You just uncovered what they call a modern day injustice, which actually keeps families separated as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you ready for that? Because you're not going to want to believe it, but it's 100% true what you just said. And I'm going to prove it to you. You know what? Everything you just described, you know where that injustice lies at? Everything you just said. You know where that injustice exists at? Affordable housing. Right. Everything you just explained is affordable housing to the core. And so if you got 2 minimum wage families, which means a minimum wage father and a minimum wage mother that has 1 kid, minimum wage, both of them, that means they make about altogether about $41,000, give or take $400, $41,600 total. They, just because they make $41,000, they may, and I'm saying just by a few $100s may not be eligible. At minimum wage.
Right.
And so, and the criteria for affordable housing right now, and you can call them on it, the criteria for affordable housing is what they call extreme poverty, not poverty. You would think poverty would be the baseline.
Right.
And then extreme poverty. And I'm like, hold on. Wait a minute, taxpayers' money is providing for this stuff, and the taxpayer cannot even benefit from the taxes he's paying. Something is wrong with that. And so I think sometimes that what you're saying is right, and that's just a ploy, not just on racism, not even on sexism, but mainly on classism, which is the bigger population. Remember, racism is a smaller population than sexism, but classism is a bigger population than all of them.
All of them. Right.
And so when you find that out, I'm like, then this wouldn't make that the racism was just a catalyst. It was just what they call the guinea pigs to see if we can get away with it with them. Let's just move on to a bigger class and see if we can do it to the women. Oh, we can get away with the black people and the women. Okay, then let's see if we can do it to the classes. And so one uses the other, right? And back to Dr. Doom's point, one uses the other to prey on both. And so to make you comfortable to say, well, the classism, and particularly white, and I've heard white poor folks say this, well, you know, I might be poor and white, but at least I'm not black. No, seriously, I've literally heard white people, at least I'm not black. They really believe being, and then they're poor than the average working black family.
Yeah, right.
And
But
psychology.
But Lana, that's the cognitive dissonance they've been told by their fellow superior whites.
Correct.
Who were scared that they will come and get their stuff. So they tell them, hey, I'm sitting on 100 cookies. This guy right here wants your 1 cookie. And you got to protect them from getting your 1 cookie while I'm sitting on millions. And then I told this about a sister. I was telling the sister this prime example. The sister was saying, yeah, I'm gonna get this good job and I know what's going. I said, but the white guy at the job really disliked me so much, you know, he felt like I took his job. I said, what logic does that make that he think you took his job? She said, you know, because I can tell this and that. I said, he not mad at the boss. He mad at you. Because how he mad at you for getting a job that you didn't give yourself? The boss gave you that job. So why you not mad at the boss? Because the boss has went back and told him, well, I got to get her the job. Affirmative action, affirmative action, all these things. And, you know, we need to look a certain way. So she going to get this job, but you should have got it. but don't worry, you stand in the corner and wait for him to do something wrong so we can get out of here. When all along, he don't want him to be in that job. He telling him to, he not telling the girl, he not telling my sister to lie. He telling the guy to lie, because if the guy come get close to him, he might boop his ass out of here.
But you said something 100% on point, and I'm going to give this up to Rohan next. There's a greater fear, Ron. The greatest fear of all is that those three factions will unite. Classism, sexism, and racism. The victims, I mean, maybe you can clear, the victims of classism, racism, and sexism will unite. That got to be the greatest fear of all to those who have been affluent all their lives. And so, and then what it does, it busts the tax codes up, because I'm like, listen, the greatest tax code and the greatest people that pay into the tax code are those three classes of people.
Right.
The classism, the racism, sexism. But if they ever unite, that is the greatest fear of all. And I think that is the ultimate ploy when it comes to certain types of injustices. And back to Dr. Doom's point of different battles on different fronts.
Yeah.
Okay.
My brothers, I'm sorry. I ain't mean to cut y'all, but I'm new to Mr. Dr. Doom, but nobody ain't gonna like say that my dog sound like the Marvel character Dr. Doom for just 2.8 seconds. I'm just, that had me over here rolling, because I'm looking for a Dr. Doom. I'm like, is he serious? And over there, there's a brother named Dr. Doom. Mr. Dr. Doom, how you doing? I just want, I'm sorry, that was just funny to me. I apologize to everybody. Go ahead, finish what you were saying. My bad.
Well, to be honest with you, I wish I could go deep into the history of the suffering and the challenges we face as colored men, as Black men. It's words, even to this day, still certain things still just blow me out of the water. But let's do this. We're here, and we're here presently. And what we try to do is to create solutions. We know that there are other minority groups who have gained some form of value, and they have done that through many different means, some by manipulation, some by working together. And I'm putting out on the table here, how could we change the existing narrative? We know that there are many things that are against us. We know there's broken homes, high divorce rates, culture. What do you think we can do to make the turn? How could we say to the masses out there, let's start one by one person to make a change? I'm just putting that on the table. What do you think we could do? Because this is going to happen. If we don't change, we're going to have more prisons, more foster homes, more public housing, more young men, young women having records and not get opportunity to grow.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that question. I've been preparing myself for that question all my life. Because if it ain't nothing else, if I don't know how to be nothing else, boy, I know how to be Black. You understand? And so what I realized was, and I had an opportunity to sit on a panel at the Miami-Dade Public Library System on a panel of Black history, and particularly Black history within the Liberty City community. And because I was raised in the Liberty City community, I understood the disparities, but guess what? Because I had the experience, I also understood the equities. And so what you're talking about, Ron, is, and when you talk about changing the narrative, you have to learn how to identify the equities and the disparities. Now, what does that look like? You know who I'm gonna give the benefit of the doubt? I'm gonna give the benefit, I'm gonna show you the equity in, I'm gonna find equity in the devil's disparity. Because we know the devil's either in hell or on his way there, right? Now, if I can find equity in the devil, I ain't saying nothing good about him, but if I can find equity in the devil and say, okay, here's one thing good about the devil, and if I can find, I'm sure I can find it in my people, right? Not saying I'm comparing my people to the devil, but you can't be no worse off than the devil. So here we go. The people like, well, one thing you don't want to, like the devil is this and the devil that, he's bad, 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 bad. I said, well, the devil got one thing going for him. You know what that one thing is? I said, he been in the place you never been. He done been to heaven. That's a fact. That's a biblical fact. I'm like, he got kicked out of heaven, but he lived in heaven. And so I'm like, he know what it is to actually live in heaven. We haven't even got there yet. You understand? And so you can even learn a lot from the devil. And so what did that tell me? How I got to look at even my disparities, or better yet, in plain English, I got to look at even the hell we've been through, even more objective than the devil. And if I can find that in the devil's circumstances, I'm damn sure gonna find it in mine. And so when it comes to any type of criticism, when it comes to Black people, like I've heard certain people, I ain't calling no particular name, but they love to get off on this, especially when they get a little money. They think they the only people supposed to be in Gucci stores. You understand? And everything. And so they just appalled when they're Black people and they're Black affluent people, and they go to the store and they see other Black people in the Gucci stores as if they're the only ones supposed to have money. And that is, to me, that's an indictment on you. I'm like, wait a minute, you're insulted. And you getting on Facebook and social media and because you saw a Black man with a Gucci bag, or you saw Black people in a Gucci store. Something is fundamentally wrong with that. And you are a person that's Black and affluent. And even at an affluent level, you went to the mall, went to the Gucci store, instead of you being happy. And what makes you, as a Black person going in the Gucci store, to become more insulted by seeing Black people in the Gucci store as opposed to inspired? What in the hell is that? You understand? And so I'm saying now, if I had the narrative, and when God blessed me with some money to go to the Gucci store, my narrative is this. I'm like, we belong in the Gucci store. You know why? Because those G's are very representative, especially those double G's are very representative to who we are as Black people in America. And one thing that's special about Black people in America, we are the greatest givers and gatherers this country has ever seen. And matter of fact, here goes another G, since we can triple G it. Since you're talking about Gucci, I'm like, we had Gucci way before Gucci became Gucci. We was making Gucci in this country way before Gucci. So we was the greatest givers to this country, we the greatest gatherers to this country, and we the greatest generous people to this country, because we're the only community that other cultures that can migrate to come and build themselves. I mean, literally build franchises. You can be Asian and move to the Black community and build yourself a franchise. You can be Hispanic and move to the Black community and build your franchise. So that is going, I'm like, we're the greatest givers to the community. And whether they want to admit it or not, they built their legacy and franchises on Black communities. I'm like, let me tell you something. And because we're givers, and I don't believe that God is a liar, anybody that gives us they're gonna always thrive no matter what the hell of the circumstances they're in. That's a fact. And so never be afraid of the givers and the gatherers who you are, because guess what? Our relationship has always been the greatest resource in this country. And anybody that's trying to separate you Black or white is getting ready to make you less and less of a person, or trying to kill you. You should never and can never separate Black people, because we are our greatest resources. That's a fact when it comes to Black people. And so why is people criticizing of what we don't have? We need to focus on what we do have. Because guess what? If you had a drought and a famine right now, Black people about to be the only ones surviving right now. Because we value our relationship so much that it transcends us out of slavery. We're the only people in this country that can say that. But we embarrassed about who we are? You embarrassed because you can go to the Gucci store and you saw other people and you weren't inspired? Something is sick about that individual who said that. I'm not calling a name, but if I hear him say it again, I will.
But let me say this, Alana, we have to remember that comes with that insecurity, that big insecurity that we have that we have for ourselves. And that feeds into it feeds into that whole classism that you talked about. Even in our own community, I want to be better. I want to be looked upon better than the other people. And this is what we lost a lot of our community. Listen, yes, we've lost some of our, but we lost a lot of our community because of that same mentality. Because we could still have these so-called segregated communities if we wanted to. You know, how did you get these schools that, historically all Black schools? How do you get those schools? From the time it was established, it was all Black schools. That because nothing but Black people live in that area. Schools are for the community. You don't have a school that don't have the people in the community until you start busting them. And then you had people at the school that wasn't from a community. And that goes right back into this, what we're talking about, this housing situation. Who is the community? What's important in the community? And what values we pick up from that community? Because sometimes if you move to a certain community, you take on the aura and ideas of the community that you live in. You know, I argued with a friend of mine, you know, here in Philly about the dirtiness. Like they say how dirty a block could be, and saying that I'm not gonna clean up for them people over there, right? They come out, they throw stuff on the ground, this and that, and blah blah. And I'm gonna tell you, I see that a lot, man. I mean, I've seen a man literally have some trash in his hand. I'm looking at the trash can right there and right there. He took it and just threw it on the ground. And all I wanted to say is, hey man, but I thought to myself, he might get offended and might shoot me. So let me just, guess what? I'm gonna show him one better. I went and picked it up and put it in the trash. And this is how we change. Don't complain about them. Let them know that they're outside of the norm. Because they're gonna always get defensive about it. You trying to tell me what to do? No, I'm gonna show you what to do. I'm gonna show you what to do in my neighborhood. I'm gonna show you what to do. I'm gonna show you how this happens. You know, but again, that only happens when the stuff belongs to you. This is why we talk about public housing being so horrible. No men, you know, say no men there that want men coming in, because who is taking the demand to say, this is where I live at? This is mine. It ain't theirs. They know it's not theirs.
And yeah, so you're talking about the difference between an ownership mentality versus a mentality of being owned.
Right.
And so, of course, I don't want to give you ownership mentality. You know why an ownership mentality is so dangerous? Ownership mentality is dangerous because it liberates the mind. And anyone that get a taste of being liberated in anything is gonna realize the box that they came from. You understand? And when you start to realize, wait a minute, this is what freedom is, you're gonna flourish in freedom, because anything free will grow. That's almost inevitable. It's your what they call it, ecological, not economical, but that's your ecological right to grow. And so once I put you in a space and the right environment to grow, then you have no choice but to grow, and growth will be inevitable. I think the only threat to your growth is you may outgrow me. That's the problem. And I think we adopt that even as brothers and sisters, or just as a people in general, because the disenfranchisement within our culture and our history is so deep that we go out and we do things that don't make no sense. We'll sell communities for cul-de-sacs. I've seen people do it, literally, communities for cul-de-sac. I'm like, you sold a whole block so you can buy a cul-de-sac somewhere else and be managed. And so here we are selling freedom, right? You ready? Selling a free community that you own and that you can literally, all you got to do is apply vision to it. That's it. And we're going to talk about that part in a minute. But all you have to do is apply a vision to it. And guess what? That thing will flourish and become an inheritance for your children for the rest of your life. No, you didn't want that. You said, I'm going to sell this free community and I'm going to buy a cul-de-sac where these people can control me. Because there's a certain thing called homeowners association, but you let them sell you on that. So you sold freedom, right? Back for captivity. I'm talking about a lot of freedom. So you sold acres of land, right? For what may be the equivalent to a half an acre of land, because you like the way the house was built. And so your whole community to move into a cul-de-sac where they said and I love homeowners association because it could be a good and a bad thing. I see it as a bad thing because what it does is it kind of like it legalized the redlining again. And it legalized that hierarchy again. You understand? And it legalized your right to manage your property. You understand? You don't have that right, because if your property is painted a different color, if you have certain visitors, you can't even live freely in that house because the homeowner association says, no, you can't.
Listen, you cannot leave your trash can outside.
Correct.
Why not? It stinks. I don't want it to be in the garage. You cannot leave it outside. You're a prisoner.
Correct. And we're so, and listen to me, and I'm telling you, I've seen people that can explain that to you like, well, yeah. And I'm like, listen, we can talk about the pros and cons all day long, but anytime somebody has the right to lean on your property because you didn't follow their rules, you understand? That's the mindset of being disenfranchised. I'm like, wow, you mean to tell me you came this far and you acquired all that knowledge and acquired all that money and all that professionalism to trap yourself. Guess what? They didn't even have to trap you no more. You trapped yourself and you paid a hefty price to do it, as opposed to redeveloping your community. And now you left, you sold the community, went to the cul-de-sac, and now the other people who's like you paying the home association, they doubled back and went back to your community and bought it and developed their community for their people. And I'm like, and I'm supposed to be mad at them? I'm not mad at them.
Lana, I was just about to say that if we look at the breakdown of this stuff, man, listen, you said it and I left it alone, but you just brought it back up, that there was an area that people lived on, and then they decided they didn't want to live there no more, and they moved somewhere else. And then they convinced, and I remember this happened in Philly clear as day. The people stayed in the Richard Island projects. When they tore the projects down, they told them they would move them out to the suburbs. And all those people thought it was a great idea until they realized they didn't move them really out to the suburbs. They moved them out to projects that was outside the city. So that the city where all that, remember, you go into a brand new place, you're going to be outside the city, but it's not where you at, it's who the people who are there. Next thing you knew, the little county that this little new place was in, the police department went insane because it seemed like they were spending all of their energy when they used to wasn't doing anything, eating donuts and sitting on the side of the road talking about, whatever. Now they gotta be in and out of there, in and out of there. They tore down the projects. And then they built them nice high rises. Not the ones like that, not the ones like the high rises that was there. We talking about ones where not with you got the whole one of the top floors, the whole two top floors is somebody's penthouse. Like it where we used to be a building that building held 300 units. That same looking building only hold 28 units. You see where we're going with this? Yeah. So, and then now those people are living in that community. The regentrification, they living in that community. But the problem is some of the stuff around there they couldn't get rid of. So he can man go to his car, he can go to his what's that electronic car?
Tulsa.
He going to a Tulsa, and then some dudes just bop him on the head. He crack his head open and take his car. Because what you did is you told people they got to live over there on this side of the tracks, right? They got to live on this side of the tracks. Don't come over here. Then you convince them, oh, you want to come over here? Come over here, come over here. Get them over there into the place, and then you move to the other side of the tracks. That's what has happened. People don't want to believe it, but that is what has happened.
Absolutely.
Because the areas that used to be considered areas that was for the underdeprived are now the high. Because I would love to walk to work if I live downtown. If I work downtown in the office ride, I would love to leave my building, not have to drive my car and walk down the block, or jog to work, and then take a shower when I get to work. But I can't do that if these people still staying around here. So let's move them out all the way out west. let's move them out west, and it turned to the wild, wild west. You know, and you see that happening everywhere. It's just another transition of the movement of our people, and we have to wake up from it.
But then again, and that's why we have to understand, because back to Rohan's point, Rohan said something where he said about the solutions and how can we see it. I'm like, well, that solution is really going to have to start with not just ourselves, but number one, how we see ourselves, and number two, on how we value ourselves. I think a lot of us, and I'm going to put this blame at the foot of our most affluent African-American people. Our most affluent African-American people thought, who really never really valued themselves. I say because the moves they made told me they didn't value themselves. When you think that for me to move to another location brings more value to me, right? It devalues the location of where you left. This is what we became a victim of. Again, right. In order for me to be valuable or to increase my value, I have to move from where I'm legitimately planted. And guess what? Legitimately protected. I'm talking about legitimately and organically, right? Protected, cultivated in the very soil that I can literally grow. As a matter of fact, the very soil that's responsible for my growth. Now that I'm a doctor, you understand? So the very soil that I grew in, somehow in the process of growing, I convinced myself in order to be more valuable, right? I got to uproot myself out of that particular soil that was proven to grow me into the person that I am and move to a place of value, even though that place didn't prove that it was going to add value to who I am. Mm-hmm. And so when we start to realize that, wait a minute, the value was never really in the place where I was. The value is really in who you are. You understand? But they think that other people add value to us. Now, that is legitimately a slave mentality. And I always hear slave mentality, but it's always applied to like working class people or people who are of a certain economic class, lower class. But I'm like, no, a slave mentality.
Exactly. Say it again. It is not that. It is exactly what it is. It's a mentality.
Correct.
You cannot be your independent own person. You have to be like a leech on somebody else, and everything they got is greater than anything you could ever have.
Correct. And in order for you to be either greater or more valuable, you have to be assimilated with them, and they have to add value to you, or else your value by itself doesn't exist or isn't worth anything. That is not true, but I hear it on so many fronts, and I'm like, listen, people didn't go to school and graduated. I mean, not graduated, but our people didn't do all that sacrifice to send you to school to get dumber. And so when we're talking about simple logic and simple ethics, I'm like, how do you figure that? And so now what we've done, and this is and we don't have to eat this 50%. These people, I'm like, listen, we're not experiencing gentrification because white people just did this coup. They just came in and did it. I'm like, no, you were sold into gentrification. Mm-hmm. You had elected officials, the most elected officials you ever had in the history of African America. In the history of African America, which means you had more people in position to protect you. And just about across the board, because gentrification is a national thing, right? That happened across the board. And I'm like, you really believe that I believe that 100% of that was white orchestrated? Mm-hmm. No, 50% of that was black manipulated.
Well, I mean, again, Lionel, you got to remember that, my dad wrote a post just the other day, we think the world is black and white, but we forget that green money rules it all. And so that green money is subjected back to what you said before, class. The higher class believe that money is important. But they have the money, and all the other classes attain to be like them with the money, And so you see this idea of utilizing that. And so let me ask this, and we got the time. I know that me and Lionel have been given we almost was on here like Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. Du Bois giving a breakdown of the black family from the house. But listen, this is important for us to think and listen to this, because sometimes we'll take that narrative that Lionel was talking about, is thinking that it only is about us not living in the projects with our family, and the reason why our family's not together is that was the reason, that one simple reason. And that sounds like, I agree with Lionel, that sounds asinine. First off, that's a lie, because many of those guys were still with their families. They just didn't live with their families. They still came by every day, seen their kid, dropped their woman off some money and some stuff, and went back to work. So the idea that you make this idea that someone out here pimping and skipping and got women living up in the projects and riding around in big Cadillac, that wasn't that's all the fairy tale of blaxploitation that somebody wanted you to maybe believe, but that wasn't the real working class during that time and how they operated. They couldn't live together, but they were still a extended family, the best. Because even if you take a place like Chicago, and it's clear in Chicago, they would only let the women stay in the housing project. The men had to move because there was no housing things around there. The men had to move all the way to the north. So you talking about living in North Chicago, up north side, and your family down south side. You know, so you have to say, well, I'm gonna come down on the weekend to see you. Because it ain't like we sometimes keep making things like it is now. You got to get in your mind, you can just get in your car. Listen, I ain't gotta listen, this week, my sister's out of town and she got the car. And so I'm in the house with no car. Yesterday, I tried to ride a bicycle down to the 7-Eleven. And then I got halfway there and realized I ain't have my wallet. Because I forgot I didn't have my wallet. Man, you know, I was so hurt because I started riding back. I was so tired. And I want you to think about this. This is not that far. I mean, maybe 3, I mean, it might not even be that long. But just think about having to be a father who works every day. And you work close to where you're going to get a job close to where you work because you want to be able to come straight home and lay it down. But you don't have the time to try to get down all the way back down South Chicago to see the family every night. You ain't got no we ain't got no cell phone, you know. And people be like, how my mama would not let my daddy, he was like a Rolling Stone, he never came home. It wasn't that he never came home. He could only come home when it was time to give you some of that, give your mama some of that money. So she could keep on living, see the kids for a little while, and then get back up the road. Because not only did he have to worry about being, he had to worry about his traveling from there and to. See, we forget the privileges that we get today. Not that it's any different, because some of us can't travel from here to there today without getting 90 bullet shot us and 60 of them in our body. You know, you can't do that today, but you understand it was a much higher risk. And that higher risk comes back what I'm telling you about before, when a lot of talk, the fear that was stoked in us after slavery. And it wasn't a fear of this, it was a fear of taking our lives. And it made us adjust how we handled and did things, because there's many, listen, when we talk about women being the backbone of our community and how strong they is, you have to recognize how strong they is, because that time was the time that they were the strongest. I think so much about Malcolm X's mother. And if you know anything about the story of Malcolm X and his brothers and sisters, and after his father was killed, his mother literally went insane. And then she was put into the mental institution, and all his brothers and sisters were sent all around because she was broken. She wasn't broken because she was unfit mother. She was broken because these people killed the love of her life, and she didn't know what to do to try to be able to maintain this whole lifestyle. That's severe trauma. And I want to remind people that when I'm saying that we are so easy to say the things that we do are just us being nasty, not being good, we discount our traumas. We discount that we have serious deep traumas that have occurred, and some of us don't even know they have occurred to us. They're in our genetics, in our genes. So we have to remember that. Let me get some of the guys. Guys, I know you guys have been listening patiently. Any questions, comments from the guys that's in the room tonight about this topic of living in the house, or maybe your own experience about how you live in the house or don't live in the house, you know, how you've been able to father by living maybe in a different place. Any fathers want to speak on that tonight as we begin to get ready to turn the corner towards the end? No, we don't get one taker. Doom, Ronald, Fred.
Yeah, I like Doom. Doom was definitely and Travis. You know, all these guys are always on the right track. You know, just give what you got to give. Whatever God gave you to give tonight, man, give it. It's yours to give. I see Elder on here
Right,
too.
boy.
He done
You
snuck on.
basically said everything. I just let you talk, man. I was agreeing with everything you were saying. You were saying everything, so no. Come back. I come back. I'm saying.
But that's the thing about Trav, and right now, and every time this is what I love about Trav. Every time I hear Trav background, I can always hear some kids in the background and stuff like that. And again, if we don't know how to own that narrative, and that's it. All we got, you know what? To Rohan's point, that's the answer, Rohan. We have to own our narrative, Rohan. There's nothing somebody should be able to explain about being Black greater than you. You should be the greatest explanation of what it is to be Black. And then again, guess what? Not only just be Black, what the greatest explanation of what it is to be a man, the greatest explanation of what it is to be a father. You understand? Right. In your own right. Because there's no right answer other than God himself outside of you when it comes to your experiences. And so own your narrative because you own your experiences. And the only way we can own our narrative is to own our experiences. And so what may work for you may not work for me. But the fact of the matter is there is some historical strategies that factually work, like that still works to this day when we understood the value of each other. So guess what? We can have 14 people in a 2-bedroom house. You understand? But I can guarantee you 14 years later, we'll have 14 houses. You understand what I'm saying? And if you understand the empowerment of that, you can never suffer from the embarrassment. And I think too many times we allow people to take something that was an empowerment that was historically used in our culture and transform it into an embarrassment. And we break down into embarrassment where you could see the minute our children make a little bit of money, they rather go out and pay rent as opposed to invest in the home that they own that will eventually come to them and go see the world. You understand? I'm like, we have to start thinking like that. We have to be optimistic. And I mean optimistic when it comes to, man, if I live with my parents and I contribute $500 a month to their house, I get to save $1,000 as opposed to going ahead and rent for $1,500. And now, if I can save $1,000 a month every so often, at least once a season, notice what I'm saying, it's 4 seasons a year, I can set foot, listen to me, all inclusive. For y'all who have never heard the term all inclusive, I can set foot all inclusively on another country 4 times a year if I simply stayed with my parents and paid them $500 and banked the other $1,000. Simple logic.
Hey, Lionel, let me throw something even deeper in there. We got this materialistic idea. Listen, you know how many of us had houses that our people owned that we threw away? And now we live in an apartment? The people bust their butt. They bust their butt working, maid, slaving, all this to get this property that they was thinking in the mindset that the kids would want to stay and it be down in the generations. And the kids did what? They sold it, got rid of it, and now living in the apartments over there in the fancy neighborhood. When they could be paying nothing. They could be paying nothing in the house.
And that's what I don't like, and that's why I'm a person. I feel like that too. Like my granddaddy's still alive and everything. He has his house. Had that house since I think my mama said she was since she was born. And nowadays I see people talk about how, you know, they gonna just get a house and you know just no, they rather rent a house and play house instead of just actually owning their own house and making it grow or do something with it. I mean, shoot, I have a sister right now who's literally, you know what I'm saying, she has a house, she has 2 houses. She renting one out and the other one she's living in right now. You know what I'm saying? And and she's my inspiration. I just, her and my granddad is my inspiration, and my mama, they all 3 is my both inspiration for owning my house and keeping my house. Cause my mama always said that she wanted a house to make sure that if anything went wrong with us, you always could come home, and I still believe in that to this day. Now these public houses, and you know what I'm saying, I feel like, you know, it like you said, it was meant to keep us docile, keep us in control, keep us, you know what I'm saying, just down. Because I see people in these houses and see people in these homes, you know, on public housing and stuff like that. Some of them just rather live off the system. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying no names, you know what I'm saying? And I have seen some who got up out the system and got into an actual home and they doing it. And I feel like we like you said, like we have to think, you know what I'm saying, for the future, because that's how I feel. Like I want my home to stay in my kids' life forever.
Right. But that me and Travis, you might have to put something in play that it does. Because what we learning a little bit about history is that I think a lot of people in their grave right now would feel that their family would be still living in their property right now today. You know
what you saying, Ron? And that's the equity of, because Travis, I'm gonna be honest with you, Travis actually wrapped this thing up. I'm glad he opened his mouth, because had he not said it, he said a mouthful. He didn't even realize he could say it. Let me tell you how godly of what I mean, like how divine what you said, Travis, that you didn't even realize what you said. You said most people rent a house to play house. Let me say it again. Most people rent a house to play house. And I'm gonna be honest with you, you can't get a greater definition of playing house than renting a house.
Right, exactly.
And so that's what our children are doing. And guess we told them to do it. When you get sitcoms and we raising them on Friends and stuff like, you understand? That's not really kind of intuitive to their reality.
Yeah.
You understand? Yeah. And so when they see things and they see what a fabricated reality of success, they think, oh, you know what? Let me get out of security, or better yet, let me move out of equity. Because we don't understand. I'm like, listen, we should, and we instinctively understand what the word is, but our next generation really don't. And so let me explain what this is. You move out of equity, right? Right, and put yourself in a disparity, because you don't really know what is disparity, because truthfully, you're paying for the fantasy you saw it on the sitcom Friends. And see, you think, okay, you know what? And when I move in, when I go to Playhouse, I can do what I want to do, not realizing how expensive it is. Then you find out you end up moving from the very place when you get serious. Now you're really ready for a real life, and you find yourself back in that place you move out of. And the thing about it is, you gave that place no equity, because you gave all your equity to a fantasy, which made that other family rich. And then your parents, and guess what? Only because they love you. And you don't understand the value of love, because no way in the world they should have let you back in their place when you took all your good times and somewhere else. And now you're gonna come back on your hard times. And I got to bill you from 0 when you was at 50, and you gave everybody else your 50, and you coming back to my house at 0. Only love will let you in that door. And that's something only a Black community give you, or a Black family can give you. Not saying it don't happen in white families, but simply put, that's only something, let me take the car out of it, but that's only something that a family can give you. And the abuse that we infringe on our families and people that's trying to just say wisdom that we blatantly disregard, because I can tell you, I've done it. But I caught on quick at 24 and was able to rebound and purchase my mom a house way back in 1998, paid it off in 2001 because we bought it from another black owner everything was lined up. And we bought it from a black owner. She got a free paid off house with a deed and everything before she died and left here in 2009. And so I think if you truly want to build, we got to build collectively, get out of these fantasies and understand that you're missing opportunities to see the world right now. If you make a minimum wage right now, you can see the world. Pay your family that $500. And guess what? Ain't nobody gonna be mad at you. You pay them $500. Pay them that $500 and take the rest of that money, save some, go see the world. Take some all-inclusive trips, cruises and stuff like that. Because one thing an African-American, I can tell you that's really a good thing about living in this country. Every African-American child that's born here is entitled to three things: a Social Security card, a passport, and a $500 credit line when you turn 18. It's true. And I'm telling you straight up, you don't believe me? Ask anybody who went up to the world of college or trade school or whatever the case may be, and all them credit cards was coming in their way, and they just simply wrecked their credit because they knew nothing about credit. So when we understand the different accesses that we do, and be it that they're small, I'm like, no, that first $500 is really giving you access to $5 million. But if you use it right, and you stay yourself in the right places, and don't allow your credit to get blown out of the water, you'll be all right. And that was the protection factors that you were born with when you got parents who own their house and they were trying to say, listen, man, stay here until you can get on your feet. Stay here until you own. Don't leave here into rentership. Leave here into ownership. Mm-hmm. Those are the solutions that we can use. And guess what? Those were the solutions that our ancestors used to move themselves from slavery to civilization, a free civilization. That's all I got to say. But thanks a lot for that input, Travis. You done got me riled up.
He took him right back into the play. But I want to thank all the guys who joined us tonight. I want to thank everybody who's watching the replay. I know this conversation, you might say, hey, what this got to do with so much about fathers? But it has more to do with what the fathers was talking about. Not every time we got to tell you about fathers. Sometimes we just gonna have a father talk about father things that fathers should be talking about and identifying in our community. And instead of talking about, oh, look how big her booty is, how much she was twerking, I'm gonna try to get me those rims, I'm about to go ball out at the club, those kind of things. There are serious things that we need to be having conversations about if we are the leaders of our community, if we are the heads of our homes. We want to be little boys, we can play little boy games, but it takes a different opportunity to become a man that becomes that father. So, that I just say that I know people say, hey, the night conversation was a little bit different, but the night's conversation is different because it's on a different level, because you can't be a father without a home. If you're a father without a home, you're a nomad, and you're a nomad carrying your family all around. So I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We're gonna get out of here and do our chant, and we'll see anybody who wants to come tomorrow. We'll get a little bit more in detail tomorrow. With tomorrow's topic on Fatherhood Talks, Fathers Only Group. So again, I want to invite anybody who might look in the message, look in the chat area. You'll see how to get located into the group for tomorrow night. With that being said, Jenna, repeat after me. I am a man of honor.
I am a man of honor.
I am a man of courage.
I am a man of courage.
I said, I am a man of respect.
I am a man of respect.
I said, I am. I say, you are. I said that we are.
Championship fathers.
Fathers. thing. Yo, thing.
Now, like, and listen, let me tell you, the kids always in the background, no matter where in the house.
That's what I love about Travis' background.
When I'm saying it, I hear them repeating after us. And that's the kind of mantras we need for them to see us doing, for that to be a learned behavior for them. And so, folks, we said that tonight. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next week. And for you fathers, we'll see you tomorrow night. Good night.